Welcome to Congress Park Neighbors. Thanks everyone for attending tonight. We've got quite a full agenda. Congress Park Neighbors has been an RNO for over 40 years. We're recognized by the city. We have an all-volunteer board and other volunteers that work on projects throughout the neighborhood. Our goal is to provide accurate information for neighbors regarding issues that city government is deciding on and managing. The board does not take a position on any issue or at any city meeting without first polling affected neighbors to ensure true representation. We welcome homeowners and renters alike. This meeting will be recorded. Please direct your questions to the chat. After our speakers have presented, there will be time for to be able to ask questions and get answers. So thank you everyone for coming. Our first presenter tonight is Jeff Bader, who is here, I believe. Hi, Jeff. And he's going to present about DURA and the Inn Motel. Right, Jeff?
That's right. Thank you, Vicki.
Yes, thanks for coming.
Of course. Thank you all for having me and just giving myself and the redeveloper of the Inn Motel property the opportunity to come and provide you all an update on that redevelopment effort. But at least for me to mostly talk to you guys about my agency, the Denver Urban Renewal Authority, who we are, what we do, and what our participation in that redevelopment might look like. So with that, I'm going to attempt to share my screen. And let me know if you all are able to see that presentation.
Yes.
Perfect. All right. Well, I'm going to let Brian Toebler, the property owner and redeveloper of the site, really kick us off and provide you all an update on the project over there. So Brian, do you want to take it over?
Hey, thanks, Jeff. Is my video working? Can you see me, or is it just my voice?
Can see you.
I can't see myself, so usually I see myself talking. So there's my beautiful motel. I'm sure you guys are more than familiar with it, and I'm sure if I asked you guys to raise your hand, you probably would say we're very interested in understanding what my plans are to do at this site, which is why I wanted to join the meeting and just give you an overview of what we've been working on for the last 6 years since we bought this motel at an auction back in April of 2016. So thanks for letting me join your call. I appreciate the opportunity to kind of discuss it and give you an overview of the site. So some background, we purchased, as I said, we purchased this site back in April of 2016. And the intent at that time was to renovate the motel. So we had thought that what we would do is something that we had done similarly down the street, which is kind of take an old blighted building and clean it up and rent these out as housing units. So these units right now are 265 square feet, so they're relatively small. But since we had experience doing that similar down the street, we thought there was going to be a good demand for that. And that was the original plan when we bought it. But within about a week of that purchase, we sat down with former city council members, and they expressed to me a desire for us to do something a little bit more catalytic. So Denver was, actively designing the rapid transit system at the time. They had invested and planned on investing a lot of money on the corridor. And this site was unique. It was quite large. And there had been feedback that they had received from their constituents that, hey, we don't have a hotel that's nearby. We've got a few, but nothing that's, where we would want to send our parents or our children when they came to town. And they also said that National Jewish Hospital down the street, they had given some feedback. Some of the executives there had given feedback that they have a tremendous amount of people coming in from out of state, patients, traveling nurses, and that their thought was, hey, we could keep it full. We would really be interested in what was going to go on. National Jewish was really asking questions about the site directly across the street from them, which is, I think, the Palace. But since we had this site and we were talking, I think it was just kind of would this be a design intent that you would consider? So that kind of took me down a path of exploration. We had never done a hotel before. We certainly had never done like an independent boutique type properties. So a lot of feedback I got from friends and neighbors in the area said, hey, you should go check out Austin, Texas. They do it really well down there. They have South Congress Hotel. It's very similar to East Colfax in a lot of respects. And there's a lot of independent hotel companies and independently branded restaurants. And, I think you would learn a lot. So I went down there and sat down with their executive team and kind of pitched them on, would you guys have an interest in coming to Denver? And they said, we love Denver. It's like a sister city for us. We would love to kind of get our wedge into that city. The company that I'm talking about is a group called New Waterloo. If you look at their website, if you're in front of your computers, which you all are, you can take a look at newwaterloo.com and you can kind of get a feel for kind of what they've done. So this was early on in the purchase. And after about 2 years of talking with New Waterloo, I just honestly never got comfortable with hotels and restaurants and operating companies because I was multifamily development. So I went back to an original plan of maybe this should just be multifamily again, and got some feedback from banks. Now, given the size of the units, 265 square feet, the banks felt that it was almost functionally obsolete. Like nobody would be able to live in something that small, and they didn't have kitchens. So when you add kitchens, it's even smaller. It becomes really a single room occupancy, if you will. So then we thought maybe we should look at tearing the building down and doing a brand new 5-story, larger development here. And we sat down with HUD and tried to apply for their 221D4 program, which is a financing program that allows you to spread costs over 40 years, bringing down the cost or the debt service on a large property like this to a more manageable. And their feedback after 9 months, frankly, was surprising. They said, our design was 550 square feet units, and we thought we could rent these things in an attainable $1,250 a month price point. And they said, that's way too much money. Nobody could afford to pay that, surprisingly, looking back. So we wasted about 9 months talking with HUD, and now we're probably 3 years into this. And we said, maybe what we need to do is go back to this hotel concept. So I reached back out to New Waterloo and said, hey, I think we're kind of trending back to a hotel. Are you still interested? Which they were. Sat down with Councilwoman CdeBaca's I think she was the director, one of her staff members, and wanted to view this as a low-income housing tax credit opportunity first before we pivoted. And their office introduced me to Laura Clark with SB Companies, and she gave me some feedback on whether or not it would work as a low-income housing tax credit. And her feedback basically gave me the following 3 points. She said that investors would be very sensitive to units that were so small, especially for a first-time developer. She said, perhaps if you combine the units, but then it's only 27 units and it's on the edge of too small for a low-income housing tax credit finance. So that wouldn't be feasible. Furthermore, the ground level would be difficult because the commercial retail space, if left vacant, would be a problem for CHFA. And then lastly, any building that's chasing or pursuing a 4% low-income housing tax credit is very difficult when it's not located in a QCT. So we got feedback that, okay, low-income housing tax credit play here is not functional and feasible. We didn't like the idea of demoing the building. We liked the fact that we think it's a contributing structure to Colfax. It may not look it today, but I think if you see the renderings on your screen, I think what we're going to invest and want to invest will really kind of beautify the building. And because it has some historic integrity, we were able to apply for historic tax credits, which help. So our plan really is to bring in this company, New Waterloo, to manage it. We're going to renovate, full renovation of the existing hotel, which you see on your screen. We're going to put in a ground level restaurant, which was the former Rock Bar site. That particular restaurant site used to be called the Gold Room back in the 50s. And it was a lot of cool stuff we found when we did the history of the building. You know, they used to have a pig roast there on New Year's Eve. It was really cool. They had a lot of people that would play piano. And so we found a lot of interesting history of that site, which we want to bring back the Gold Room per se, but it's going to be 3-meal restaurant service in that space. We're going to build a new building on the other corner to add more rooms, but we wanted to keep it 4-story, not 5-story. It's zoned for 5, but we thought mass and scaling of the neighborhood, 4 stories made sense. So we thought not going more dense and less dense would be better for the community. The ground level would then house underneath the new building a coffee shop, and New Waterloo's got a lot of experience with their Manana is a coffee shop in their hotel, and it's coffee and pastry, and this is all made on site, and ice cream. Just a really great concept there, which we thought would be well for the guests and the community. And in the middle of both would be a pool concept, which would also allow for day passes for the community to come and sit and lay around and have a drink, and kind of activate it with local bands that maybe are playing down the street that could stay here, and really be kind of a community gem. So we wanted to fit in the fabric of the community. We paid attention to the East Area Central Plan, and we kind of went through thought concepting here, and we feel good about what we've done. Reached out and applied to Jeff's group, and that's why Jeff is meeting with you all today. But that's what our plan for the site is. I'll turn it over to Jeff, and he can talk about their potential involvement, and then I'll be happy to answer any questions about what we're doing, you know, and those types of things afterwards.
Absolutely. And one thing I just want to add to make sure you get credit, Brian, is you had come when you applied to us, and Brian applied to us in 2019, actually in April of 2019. So we just passed 3 years of this potential redevelopment, surviving the onslaught of a pandemic and several other crazy world affairs. So it's just crazy to reflect on. But throughout this process, you know, one thing that the city cared about and we cared about was not only commercial activity on the ground floor, but having some sort of space to be utilized by, that would be affordable commercial space, to be used either by community serving uses or artists or nonprofits, but in a space that would be affordable to them. And so we came to Brian, this was just a few months ago, really requesting him to reopen his design of the ground floor to see if he could find any space that could be utilized for affordable commercial space. And to his credit, he was willing to meet our terms being our organizations in the cities, and establish this new affordable commercial space on the ground floor. So just a really cool way for the city to make a good project even better. And kudos to Brian to have the willingness to relook at his design.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate that.
So thank you for that, Brian. And you know, I as I mentioned at the beginning, I'm a redevelopment specialist with the Denver Urban Renewal Authority. We've been looking at this project for over 3 years, and we're excited that we're finally at the a point in time where we feel that this might actually move forward as a redevelopment. So I wanted just to talk briefly, I know you guys have a full agenda, a little bit about who we are at DURA, what we do, and our participation in this project. So the Denver Urban Renewal Authority, or DURA, is simply responsible for all urban renewal activity throughout the city and county of Denver. What that means is we are tasked by state statute in helping the city of Denver remediate blighted areas across its city and to stimulate the regrowth of those areas. We are not a city department. We are a quasi-governmental independent agency. So we are not under the city umbrella. But while we are separate, we do work in lockstep and collaborate with them anytime we're looking to assist a redevelopment project or establish and create an urban redevelopment plan. That's for several reasons, but most fundamentally is everything we do has to be adopted and approved through city council. So we work very closely with the city to make sure that any project we're bringing forward meets the objectives and priorities of what the city is trying to accomplish. There are two departments within our organization, a redevelopment department, which is where I reside, that looks to use our urban renewal powers to help support the redevelopment of blighted areas. And we also have a wonderful housing department, which administers several affordable home rehabilitation grant and loan programs. I wish I knew more about those programs, but if any of you all are interested in what those programs might be, please feel free to write in the chat, and I'm happy to follow up with you after. So again, our fundamental objective as an organization is to remediate blighted areas across the city and stimulate the regrowth of those areas. That is our core objective. But in addition to that objective, there are several other public benefiting objectives we look to accomplish anytime we are assisting a redevelopment project. Those objectives range from creating more affordable housing, establishing new multimodal infrastructure, creating more parks and open space, historic preservation, or overall economic revitalization. In terms of this all-in redevelopment project, we're really excited to help rejuvenate this deteriorated historic asset along the corridor, but also provide some economic revitalization for this segment of the Colfax corridor and provide some more commercial retail ground floor uses that will really cultivate a more active pedestrian environment and provide more job opportunities. Again, we can only use our powers in areas that are deemed blighted. So really our fundamental question, our gating question is this area that's requesting our assistance, is it a blighted area? And the way that we're able to actually achieve these objectives is by filling a financial gap of redevelopment projects that are looking to remediate the blight of an area or accomplish these other objectives. And the financing mechanism we have to do that is a tool known as tax increment financing, which I'll talk about in a moment. But while the gating question is this area blighted? We don't get approached by developers saying, hey, our area is blighted. We get approached by developers because there is a financial gap associated with their project, typically caused by those blighting conditions. So it's my job at DURA to hear those requests, but also try to determine that if but for our assistance, would this project happen? And we take this principle really serious at DURA. My entire job essentially is trying to determine what is the minimum amount of public assistance a project needs in order for it to move forward. And the document that governs and authorizes all of this is something known as an urban redevelopment plan. In the case of this project, it would be the 3015 East Colfax Urban Redevelopment Plan. This document establishes the boundaries of the urban redevelopment area where we can conduct our activity. It defines the redevelopment project we're looking to assist. It outlines the objectives we're looking to accomplish through the assistance to that redevelopment project. It describes how that project conforms to the city's comprehensive plan and its adopted and applicable supplements. And lastly, it authorizes our ability to use tax increment financing to support that project. And this document has to go through several different approval processes. Our internal board of commissioners has to approve it and determine that it is consistent with our priorities and our mission. The plan will get presented to planning board, where they will make an official determination as to whether or not it conforms to the city's adopted plans. We have to enter into agreements with the city's other taxing entities, so Denver Public Schools and the Urban Drainage and Flood Control District. And then lastly, and ultimately, the urban redevelopment plan gets adopted by city council after a public hearing. So on this slide, you will see the boundaries of the proposed urban redevelopment area and TIFF area. And as you can see, it only includes the property of the Inn Motel that is owned by Brian. We cannot conduct any urban renewal activity or collect any tax increment outside this boundary. Everything is really hyper-focused on the redevelopment project that Brian just described. A common thing we hear in these meetings is, well, what do you mean by blighted? Is my house blighted? What are you doing with my taxes? Really want to just demonstrate to you all that everything is focused on the property within this boundary. So blight, this thing that I've mentioned several times so far, is actually defined by state statute. It's defined as an area that in its present condition and use, and by reason of the presence of at least 4 of the following factors, substantially impairs or arrests the sound growth of the municipality, retards the provision of housing accommodations, or constitutes an economic or social liability. And below are the 11 factors of blight that are listed in state statutes. But we are not the ones at DURA who go and identify whether a urban redevelopment area is blighted or not. a third-party analyst and expert is commissioned who undergoes a process known as a condition survey, where they go and conduct an on-site survey of the proposed urban redevelopment area to identify the blighting factors that they see present within that area. And they also conduct a fairly extensive off-site research to back up those findings. Once that condition study and survey is complete, they draft a document known as a condition study, which shows the evidence of the existence of those blighting factors. For this project, the condition study analysts found the following 4 factors of blight prevalent across the area: deteriorated or deteriorating structures, unsanitary or unsafe conditions, deterioration of site or other improvements, and existence of health, safety, or welfare factors requiring high levels of municipal services or substantial underutilization or vacancy of building sites or improvements. On this slide, you will see some of the images and exhibits from that condition study. And for those of you familiar with the property, you will likely not be surprised to see the deteriorated condition, both internally and externally, of this property. One thing that's important to note is while the condition study is evidence of the blighting factors existing, it is ultimately City Council who makes a determination whether an area is blighted or not when they adopt an urban redevelopment plan. So as I mentioned, our fundamental financing mechanism is tax increment financing. And I know you guys have a full agenda, so I'm going to try to go through this fairly quickly, but wanted to provide a quick overview of how that tool works for us. So when an urban redevelopment plan is adopted, a tax increment area, a TIFF area, is established. And as I already showed a few slides ago, the TIFF area only includes property owned by Brian, which is the site of the redevelopment. After the establishment of, or after the creation of a TIFF area, something known as a tax increment base is established, which is equal to the property and sales tax revenue that is being generated by the property in the TIFF area prior to any redevelopment. So it is simply just the existing tax revenue being generated in the area. And that tax base continues to flow to the city's taxing entities as it's created.
Jeff?
Yes?
I think we need to wrap this up. We have
Got it. Okay.
A
That's
lot of
totally fair.
questions.
Absolutely. So I'm happy to answer any questions about how TIFF works as they come up. But lastly, just wanted to express we're looking to assist the rehabilitation of the Inn Motel and the construction of the new building, but really focus on the historic preservation. We don't just reimburse any costs associated with the project. We really look to do ones that further public benefit. In this case, we would look to reimburse costs associated with the site demolition and improvements, as well as costs associated with that historic rehab. The amount of reimbursement we're looking to provide to this project is approximately $3.5 million, representing 10% of the total project budget. This is actually significantly less than we typically participate in a project, which tends to be closer to 20%.
Jeff?
And I am happy to wrap up and answer any questions.
That would be great. And
Yes.
I'm going to start with one of the questions in the chat, which is, this has been going on for 6 years. And why hasn't some rehabilitation been done now? You did not need to describe blight. We've been living with blight. So the fact that parking has been decreased is one. So why don't you address the question about why no rehab has been done? And then I'm going to turn it over to Councilperson CdeBaca, who's here and also has some issues she'd like to raise about the project.
So
Great,
I'll
you.
address some of those questions too, Jeff, if you'd like me to, with regard to why hasn't anything been done to date. Okay, if I take that, Jeff?
Yeah, take it away, Brian.
Great question. Actually, a couple things to point out. When we purchased the property, we wanted to keep the rent well below market value so that the Kim family could continue to manage for those in need of housing. So in 6 years, we never raised rent here. It's well below market rent by design. because market rent would simply close this building down. The Kims wouldn't be able to manage their operations here. It's just not generating enough revenue for them to manage it. So I don't manage it. I lease it to the family that's been there for 20 years, and keeping them there and employed was really important to me. So I agreed to do that for them so that they could stay in business. In 2019, we actually had quite a few items that we needed to address. So that gets to the point of why haven't you invested? So we needed to make sure that we were in compliance with health officials, fire department, city attorney's office. So we had a list of items to correct, and we invested over $170,000 just to keep it open, because we knew if we closed it down, it would be displacing people. So we invested our own dollars to make sure that this didn't close. When the pandemic hit, I actually offered it to host, feeling that, you know, you can just move people in there to get them off the streets and keep them safe. So it was really important for me to address it from the standpoint of the people that are there are in need. And we, and Jeff and I, can talk a little bit about what we're going to do for them when it's, I don't know if you want to talk about that today, Jeff, but we have invested, and I've made sure that we're trying to keep the site as clean as possible. You have to understand the condition of, you know, the motel and what it can generate with regard to people living there. It just needed to keep our bases so low to keep it open, but we still invested about $170,000 just to keep it a vibrant motel and operating for those in need.
And Brian, if I can just add, since you applied to us in 2019, Vicki, to your question, this was right before the pandemic hit. And I think everyone saw the impact of the pandemic on all forms of development, of real estate development, but specifically on hospitality, just cratered. And so while we were actively assessing Brian's project, the pandemic happened, and financing, if you're fine with me sharing this, Brian, just fell apart for the project, as it did for several other developments and other use types across the world. So it took quite a bit of time after the application to us for to really wait out the pandemic until financial markets were willing to loan again and lend for development projects, especially the one that Brian's proposing here.
Right. Thank you, Jeff, for saying that. There's a lot of other questions, and Vicki, I'm happy to just kind of go down the list if you have time for me to do that. How would you like me to address those questions?
Councilwoman CdeBaca, would you like to step in here?
Yeah, I can't, can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
I want to give the people who are asking the questions as much time as possible to get them answered. My position on this from the very beginning has been that, you know, the things I've heard from community about this property to begin with was that it was not well taken care of. There were parking concerns with the new development, and the transient nature of the guests was always something that people were frustrated with even before it was used for the motel vouchers. And so converting it or redeveloping it and not converting it to something that presents an opportunity for more stability there felt like it was in direct conflict with what the neighborhood was asking for. And then when the TIFF and urban renewal piece of it was proposed, that to me did not feel like it was going to be good for the Colfax corridor in general. One, because it is then a green flag to developers that the city will subsidize your profit generation with public dollars. And I personally don't believe that that's an appropriate use of TIFF. I don't love urban renewal areas in general because of the history they have of being used against communities that are more historically marginalized. And so that's where I am on the TIFF. I don't support this use for a TIFF. If we were talking about affordable housing, if we were talking about community-owned businesses, I saw the Annie's question in there. These things would make the conversation different, but we're talking about a motel for a private developer, and it just doesn't feel consistent with my values or the values of the people who elected me to represent them.
So just a couple of comments. We've actually sat down with City Park Neighborhood Association a handful of times, and they had questions about parking as well. We're not going to underpark this site. We've got the entire site behind it for parking for that purpose. So we have not pursued any over density of the site because of the parking constraints that it requires. So we're parking it to code for the hotel. And I think given the fact that it is a hotel, I expect that there is going to be people being dropped off that may not necessarily need a lot of parking. But that being said, we've got, I believe the count is 55 parking spaces here for that purpose. We did a survey. We've done 2 surveys with the neighborhood organization. The feedback I got actually was first of all, the motel needs to change because the current condition of the motel is, it's not an addition to the neighborhood. It's a subtraction from the neighborhood. When you're leasing these out at below market rates, it really puts a pressure on even making the project financially viable. So the more money we were to put in it now would just create more of an issue later for development. So we did it anyway. We invested it because we wanted to make sure it remained open, which was the most important thing for people that are living there. Furthermore, we've invested, and Jeff, I think this is something we can share. I've invested $500,000 to relocate people living there. So there's 35 people there, and I'm spending $500,000 to relocate them to safe, permanent, stable housing and providing them health services. So we're not displacing anybody. Pardon me?
Shannon Hoffman would like to ask you a question.
Yeah, that actually gets to Shannon's question I was addressing.
So I hadn't asked a question yet. I asked a question earlier in the chat, but thank you, Vicki. So it seems to me that if a TIF is to be provided, that there should be some sort of community benefit. And it seems like what the community is saying here and has been saying is that, that would be housing. It seems to me that the community benefit you're suggesting is affordable commercial rental space. So I guess first question is, can you please describe what is the community benefit and how, that necessitates a TIF? Because it seems like this is a for-profit business, right? But secondly, if the community benefit is the commercial spaces, can you please give more detail about that in terms of like, is it price per square foot, or is it based on the amount of money that these businesses are bringing in so that it's proportional and really can truly be affordable?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question, Shannon. So we view the project itself as providing benefit to the community through the rehabilitation and rejuvenation of the historic structure, providing commercial uses on the ground floor that will create employment opportunities that aren't there currently, as well as cultivating a friendly pedestrian environment along the Colfax corridor that doesn't exist definitely along this parcel, but also really on the segment of the corridor. In addition to those positive benefits of the project, there is also this affordable community space that will be used by either artists, nonprofits, and other, or by other existing businesses along the corridor that are vulnerable to displacement. The actual affordability of that space is being decided right now by the city's Department of Economic Development. So once I'm able to get those, the information on how the actual affordability on the rent will work, I'm happy to share that with this group here.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, Shannon. In addition to the commercially affordable space, which is a listed community benefit, another community benefit was the preservation of a historic structure. So, we thought that was important to preserve this history rather than tear it down and build something new that wasn't kind of the era. So it's called out for in the East Area Central Plan for the preservation of a historic structure. So although affordable housing is certainly a community benefit, and we've actually provided affordable housing here for 6 years. And we did a project down the street, the Detroit, which is attainable housing. It was a renovation of an office. So I clearly am on board with housing. We have a motel in Lakewood that we're actually moving people from here to there because of the importance of housing. So I get that community benefit. And by the way, I'm a multifamily developer by nature. So this was a stretch for me. You know, I didn't come into this thinking, I want to do this hotel. I came into this thinking, how can we make housing attainable here? But for the reasons that I kind of pointed out in the presentation, it just wasn't financially doable. It just kept hitting roadblocks to say, if you have 54 units that are 265 square feet and you can rent them for $900.
Let's get some more questions.
Well, I just wanted to address that. Thanks.
Sean?
Hi, thank you. So I live like right behind the tire cover. Probably shouldn't say that in public. And I've been in this neighborhood for 10 years. I usually have a good idea about different things. I wasn't exactly aware of how the space was being used. I think I probably knew at some point. But I am like more than concerned, that's an understatement, about the rampant gentrification and the ways that we continue to push out people without homes and low-income folks from our neighborhoods. And then we look at the results of that and become like upset about it and then want to do more pushing out when it's only doing what it's doing right now to people. And I think that impact, it doesn't just have an impact on people with low income, it also has an impact on us, the people that quote unquote benefit from it. And that impact is, it's harder to define, but it's there. And I think that, and I think it reverberates out. And I think that there has to be a point where we do something different and we want to do something different. And I think that there are smart people that can work on this. And we don't have to do what's been done in Denver for the last 20 plus years. That's all what I have to say. Thank you.
Maggie?
Yeah, I've always been concerned about this. Why are we not thinking about workforce housing? Because if we want to rebuild this corridor that has had so many bruises in the last couple of months or years, then we need to provide a place where our workers who live along here can also, we have lots of servers and they can't even live in this area. I'd like to see something happening much like they did in Baker, where they actually took that hotel, who, by the way, was the former owner of this particular hotel. They took the hotel and they turned that into workforce housing. And I think we absolutely have to have that.
Are you talking about the Broadway property?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, that site also went to auction.
Yes,
when
it
I
did.
purchased this site, and yeah, they've you know, I'm not involved in that project. I can't speak to it, but again, just to kind of reiterate, we went down the path of affordable housing here. You know, that was
Well, I'm thinking maybe you didn't go far enough down that affordable housing, because we're still talking about a opportunity for you and your
Right.
investors to make some money off of this deal, rather than the community being able to offer something up. That's my opinion.
Christopher, you had your hand up.
Yeah, no, just wanted to real quick. So I'm a resident, probably 5 houses down Milwaukee from this property, and just, you know, raising kids on the street and just seeing the state that it's in and knowing what Brian's been going through and the hoops, it seems like with the momentum that's been created, I mean, personally, I'm supportive of this project, of the commercial space that will be affordable places for us Congress Park residents to have family. Frankly, when my family and my wife's family come, we, you know, would love to have a place nearby for them to stay. And I think for those of us that live up and down here, seeing what's happening, as has been mentioned, would be the tinder to jump starting and accelerating us out of this pandemic. Because, just behind me is, File and Style moved. You look at the electronics store. I know the Contos family and their space is now getting turned over. And so I think maybe either a Torchy's or some hybrid. So that's encouraging. But, as I commute to work and drive down our portion of Colfax, I think that there's significant opportunity. And this part of it will really set the tone, for jobs and money coming in. I don't think, to solve the housing problem from hotels, it might help, but we need bigger movements on that, and not just taking, old hotel spaces and saying that's where, we're necessarily going to place people or make affordable housing, especially given the hoops that Brian's clearly jumped through. So just want to give my 2 cents as a Milwaukee resident. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Brian and Jeff, for coming. I bet down the road we'll have another meeting to share information. But I thank you both for coming and attending tonight.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Appreciate it.
Sure. Taylor Moellers is here, and she's going to talk to us about the new trash program. Taylor, thank you for coming.
Thank you for inviting me, Vicki, and thanks everyone for having me here. I'm gonna go ahead and start trying to share my screen, if I can find it in all these windows here. And I'll also just note that my colleague from the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, Jessica Lally, is here to help answer some questions as well. So without further ado, all right, is that big full screen for everyone? Looking good. I can only see Vicki's face, so.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you, Vicki.
Yes, it's
Appreciate
good.
it. So I am Taylor Moellers. I am with the city's Office of Climate Action, Sustainability, and Resiliency, here to talk about the expanded waste service proposal. This proposal is going in front of one of the council committees actually next week for the first time for its first informal presentation. And then we expect that the proposal will be in front of council for a vote in June. So here just to talk about what's going on. Hopefully I can keep this short and sweet for you guys. Talk about what our waste service looks like right now, how it's connected to climate, the actual proposal itself, and then leave some time for questions from you all. So right now, the city of Denver collects trash for around 180,000 households. That's about 60% of our residents. We provide this service to all single family homes and small apartments up to 7 units. And the agency that actually provides that service is the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure. The rest of the city's residents and all businesses have to contract with private companies for their trash services. So for the purposes of this proposal, I am only talking about the city's customers, so that 180,000 folks in single families and small apartment buildings up to 7 units. So right now, our service is paid through the city's general fund. That is where everyone's property taxes and sales taxes go to fund all different services and programs provided by the city of Denver. Everyone pays into that, even visitors, even the businesses and larger apartment buildings that have to contract for private hauling. So right now we do not charge any additional fee for trash and recycling. We do offer a compost collection program for just about $10 a month. Right now, about 74% of our waste goes straight to the landfill. So that means that we are recycling and composting about 26%, and that is our diversion rate. That is well below the national average of 34%. And we've really only seen our diversion rate grow about 1 or 2% per year over the last 20 years. And what we would really like to see as the city is to get to a 50% diversion rate. But at this pace, it's going to take a couple of decades here. Another reason why I'm here from our climate office is what we know about landfill emissions is they have a really big impact on climate change. So methane is a very potent greenhouse gas that is created when waste rots in the landfill. It does more damage to the atmosphere than carbon, but it also leaves the atmosphere a lot quicker. So as the quote here is alluding to, if we can really significantly reduce or stop our sources of methane as soon as possible, we can see noticeable improvements within our lifetime, within the next couple of decades. And then for our office, we always try to keep in mind who we're doing this work for. Climate is affecting everyone already, but it disproportionately affects our communities. People who have lower access to healthcare, lower access to healthy food and walkable parks, higher rates of poverty, they're, increased vulnerabilities to climate effects like extreme heat and severe weather events and other things that are happening. So this is not a new conversation for the city. People have been talking about how can we reduce our waste for a long time. So recycling was introduced in the city back in the early 1990s, and now about 96% of our customers have the purple recycling cart. We started offering compost about 10 years ago with the compost pilot program. We have about 30,000 customers using that service right now, which is about 20% of our customers. But other than that, not too much has changed in the past 10 years. But what we keep hearing from residents and a number of our different resident-led advisory councils like the Sustainable Food Policy Council, the Climate Action Task Force, is that we look at moving to a fee-based system to reduce food waste, increase recycling, and reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. And we have seen that work in a lot of different cities around the US. So here's just a sampling of cities that are using a fee-based system. You can see that their diversion rate, which is how much they are recycling and composting, is 2 or 3 times as high as Denver's. And what they all have in common is they charge a fee for hauling trash and they provide recycling and compost at no extra cost. So I'll get into the actual proposal and how it would work. I also wanted to mention, if we do move to a fee-based system, by state law, the fee can only cover what it actually costs the city to operate that hauling service. So the list here is all the services that would be provided in that cost of service. So everything we do right now, plus 2 big changes. We would move to weekly recycling. So right now that is picked up every other week. So we'd move to weekly recycling, and then composting for all customers at no additional fee. So right now, if you want to compost in the city's program, that's about $10 a month extra. So these two things would be included. And then, like I mentioned, everything we have right now, the extra trash large item pickup days, our annual programs like leaf drop and tree cycle, the compost sale and mulch giveaway coming up next month, those would all still be included in this service. So how the program would actually work is customers would get to choose the size of the trash cart they want, from a small, medium, or large size. And then the service fee would be based on the size of the trash cart. So the smallest cart would get the lowest fee and the largest cart would have the largest fee. Recycling and compost carts would be available at no additional fee, and they would be available in the same 3 sizes. So households can kind of mix and match what they need based on their household's needs. And then here's what it actually looks like. Took some photos from our own alleys in the office here of how you could mix and match those different cart sizes. And you could, if you get the smallest trash cart, but you choose the largest recycling bin and the largest compost bin, you would still be at that lowest fee of $9 a month. So it is only dependent upon the size of your trash cart. And then we know that, any type of new fee is hard on our residents, especially our low income and fixed income neighbors. So we are prepared to offer an instant rebate to reduce their bill. The eligibility would be based on income and household size, which is area median income. And it would be on a sliding scale, up to a full instant rebate of the fee, down to about a 50% rebate. We would be able to apply that rebate right away. So there's no bill that actually comes to folks. And then renters would also be eligible for this instant rebate program. And then, we understand a fee is hard, especially when we haven't had one in the past, but we have worked really hard to keep the numbers as low as possible. As I mentioned, by state law, we can only charge what it costs to provide the service. And based on our research, our rate would be the lowest in the region. So we go from that $9 up to $21 for the largest cart. The comparable in the Denver metro area is, up a little over $21 for that smallest trash cart. And as far as we know, there are no other cities or haulers that offer a discount program like the instant rebate program that we're proposing with this proposal. So as far as where we're at, we've been doing targeted focus groups and attending neighborhood meetings since the beginning of the year. Like I mentioned, council will have their first, or one of the council committees, land use, transportation, and infrastructure, will have their first presentation of the proposal. And then we expect that council will be able to vote on this proposal in June. If it were to pass, we'd hit the ground running on customer education around, what goes in which cart, how to recycle properly, how to compost properly. We'd start contracting with community-based organizations to help get the word out about the instant rebate program and get people signed up for that. So they're signed up before they ever see a bill come out. And then, carts could be on the streets as soon as the end of the year. So that is my slide deck for you. I'll stop sharing so I can see folks again and see the chat again, but happy to pull any particular slides back up. And Vicki, if you can help pull any questions out, that would be great too.
I will. If you raise your hand, I will try to call on you. Thank you, Taylor. Miles, you want to start off?
Sure. So thank you for the presentation. I think I've got a few questions. The trash now is currently being paid for by property taxes. I listened to another presentation at INC, and I think they may have thrown out a number. The city will generate with these fees maybe $25 million a year with these fees, additional income. So the thought is, if you wanted it to be a transfer of we're just paying for the fee, then our taxes should be credited $25 million, because the city will be generating $25 million more dollars from what we're doing now. So you're just plainly generating more money. And if you wanted it to be fair, I think you need to give some of that money back, or explain what you're going to do with the money. And I almost think it is a tax. The next thing, just another quick question, if you can answer this too, is the city's been building lots of apartment buildings. And there's now concern about greenhouse gases and climate change. What are the impacts of putting 50,000 units throughout the city, for those high-end apartments and all those different buildings, the construction, the maintenance, the power, even the trash they generate? As we talk about these things, how is that looked at if you're concerned about the environment and climate change? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Miles. I might hand over the first question to Jessica.
That's fine. Hi, thanks for having us, everyone. There's a bit of a misunderstanding with how our solid waste services are funded. So yes, solid waste is funded by the general fund, but there's a lot more than just property taxes that goes into that. So it's basically sales tax and property tax, but the majority of the property taxes that go into the general fund are actually paid for by commercial businesses and those large apartment buildings that don't actually receive our services. Visitors also pay into the general fund. So we are trying to propose something that we feel is more fair, because right now the whole city is subsidizing service for only 180,000 customers that we have. So if we're only servicing 100 single family homes and apartment buildings with 7 or less units, that's not everyone in the city. Everyone else has to then pay their property taxes and then pay for a private trash hauler on top of it. So we're trying to right that wrong and also take that burden off of our apartment dwellers and our local businesses.
So then a main goal of this is to raise additional income. It is a financial, what you just mentioned is all financial.
So I should be clear about how this money will be used. So solid waste will be moving into a special revenue fund and moving off the general fund. So the fees that we charge are all that we need to provide the service. We are not by law allowed to generate revenue off of this program. We have to keep it within a certain amount that we earn, or else we have to refund everyone in the city. So the fees are truly what it takes to provide trash, recycle, and compost service to everyone in the city. And what that general fund pot gets used for, that solid waste used to have in the general fund, if this were to pass, it could be used, and this is a conversation for another day, could be used for something that everyone in the city benefits from. We will need some of that money for the affordability program. The instant rebates will not be paid for by the cost of service. So until we know how many people sign up for the affordability program, then we'll know how much of that $25 million that solid waste currently uses in the general fund, how much of that will be, quote, freed up for programs and services that the whole city can benefit from.
Right, but again, it's being paid for now in current taxes and sales tax.
Mm-hmm.
The city's going to generate a new $25 million more dollars that all the residents are going to be paying for. That gives you a plus $25 million. So the taxes are being raised $25 million.
So it's important to note it's not a tax, it's a fee. And let me take one more stab at explaining this, and then I might have to pass it off to someone else. But I kind of just lost my train of thought. Taylor, am I missing any points that could help explain this better? That wasn't my argument. Just a point of clarification.
No, I think you've explained it to the best of our abilities. It's a fee that would be just for this service. It would only, right now, the way that the general fund works, as just mentioned, we're pulling money from folks who aren't getting the service that the general fund works, because the service isn't provided to everyone. So we are moving this. The proposal is to move to a fee-based service, and that service would only be provided to the people who pay the fee.
And this is also in response. I remember what I was going to say. So this whole proposal is also in response to some things that the community has told us that we need to do to, increase our impact on climate change, because waste has not, seen a decrease in their emissions, like buildings and transportation. We also have heard from so many people, so many of our customers, so many of our community groups that they want weekly recycling. And we also have to keep up with the rising costs of service in general. So all of that would require solid waste just needing more money from the general fund to just be able to provide quality service and to keep up with the increasing costs. And so either more money would be taken from the general fund from people who don't receive this service and to have to pay, and that people that pay for extra service on top of it, or we can charge the people that directly receive this service for the service.
I'll finish with this just quickly. I agree with you. I think we need to do the composting, but I think it needs to be clear what you're doing. Again, transfer it, credit the sales tax back, and use that new fee, but credit it back to the taxpayers. Then if you need to increase it over time, that makes sense. But for you to be taking a 25 million plus right on top of all the other taxes we're paying for now, it just seems unfair and a little bit convoluted. And then in the future, you're going to charge even more. So now the city just gets 25 million more dollars, which I consider a tax increase. So that's the part that doesn't make sense. I think the program's great, but I don't think it's an either or. I think you could do this and credit it back to make it fair and transparent for the taxpayers. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Maya.
Maggie, would you like to ask a question?
Sure. How are you going to deal with illegal dumping? We have numbers of apartment units within Congress Park, and I'm sure other places within the city that are 7 and under. What happens if the landlord purchases carts that are too small for their tenants and they run out of space? Now, I know that there's been a question too about, well, can the landlord assign the tenant the responsibility to pay for the cart, much like you would with any other kind of utility? But what happens to the property if that tenant does not pay?
Sorry, I couldn't tell if you cut out or if you finished the question, but thank you, Maggie. Yeah, first, certain illegal dumping is a concern and continues to be a concern. I don't think we mentioned it yet in this presentation, but you guys probably noticed at the beginning of the year that service routes have changed a little bit. And part of that is we consolidated into smaller routes where there are field supervisors who are getting to know their routes a little bit better to understand those unique challenges of illegal dumping and set outs and cart sizing and all of that, to have more of like a community relationship with their route to help mitigate those issues. If this proposal were to move forward, there would be some enforcement associated with it. You know, we would want to lead and would plan to lead with education as much as possible at first. We want people to know how to use their carts, make sure they're recycling and composting correctly. We don't want to punish people. But if we see that, you know, there's illegal dumping or that there's contamination issues that just keep coming up no matter how much outreach is done, then there are, you know, enforcement mechanisms like fines that could come into play, you know, a couple of years down the line. And then, did that address the full question, Maggie?
No. The other part of the question was, what happens if a landlord assigns the fee to the tenant, much like you would with any other kind of utility, and they don't pay? Will a lien be put on the property then?
So this would be kind of standardized with all the rest of DOTI's utilities, storm drainage and sanitary sewers. The same person that gets the storm drainage bill today would also be getting this bill. And yes, after many warnings, letters, direct contact, information about the affordability program, if the bill is not paid, there will be an intent to lien letter sent to the property.
I'd like to thank you. There's one thing, this is slightly outside of your provenance, but some of the pushback in our neighborhood is we are not getting good trash service. And we have been singled out to move all our bins to the street. And we're a very dense urban neighborhood. So we just got our service profoundly downgraded. And it sounds great that we could have a neighborhood supervisor or someone we could talk to. But the reason we were told we have to drag 75 bins or more out to the front of our houses where cars are parked for these multi-family homes was to support a greener, more sustainable service. And you're talking about more people on the street. So unfortunately, city policies are contradicting each other right and left. I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you both for coming, but I hope you appreciate our dilemma here, because bigger bins, even fewer, is still a huge, until the city starts picking up in the alley like they have historically done for a century, we're in a dilemma. Okay, everyone, we have Laura Morales is here, and she's going to give us an update on Congress Park Pool. Laura?
Hi, Victoria. I'm not sure that Laura's actually here, but we have Gordon Robinson, who's the Director of Parks Planning and Construction. He'll jump on, as well as Todd Decker, who's overseeing the project through completion. And then my name is Leslie Pickard. I'm the Director of Recreation. And we actually collectively, we don't have a formal presentation. We just wanted to come, respond, and answer any questions that come up about the pool-based project. I'll give a quick highlight overview. So we have kicked off design and construction just as we planned it, kicked off in 2019 with the intent that we would get to 2022 summer and be open for the residents and the community members within Congress Park neighborhood. It is designed to be a regional pool. It's going to be 50 meters with a 25-yard lap lane cutout. So a big pool, just like we used to have. The kiddie pool has moved. It's no longer going to be tucked behind the building. It's going to be in a different spot that is next to the hill that goes up towards the tennis courts. Those courts and the fence line that used to be right next to the pool and the concrete, we've actually kicked that up a little bit higher so that we have green space overlooking the kiddie pool as well as the 50-meter lap lane pool. Gordon, anything else to chime in about the Denver Elevate Bond and the Congress Park pool design?
No, I think you covered the highlights, and happy to take any questions you have about the project. It should be wrapping up, at the end of this spring, early summer, and we're looking forward to celebrating it with you and your neighborhood.
Yep.
Do you think it'll be open in June?
Yes, I do.
But you're not clear on what the actual date would be?
That's right. There's a curing process for the coating of the pool that's weather dependent. And so it really kind of depends on the weather we get over the next 4 to 6 weeks. And we're hoping that we'll have some good weather here coming up. And if so, then it should be earlier in June. If not, probably later in June. Todd Decker is also here. He's our project manager. And if I'm saying anything inaccurate, Todd, I know you'll jump in.
No, you're right about that. We're down to the final application of finishes on the pool itself before it can hold water. And as Gordon said, and Leslie as well, we had a rough February and March with weekly snow, which ate up about 2.5 days a week for about 6 weeks straight. So we've been struggling against the weather, but fingers crossed that the next 4 weeks, as Gordon said, play in our favor. So that's kind of where we're at, but that's exactly, we're all getting up every morning, looking at the skies.
So will the playground also be complete, or will it be in process still?
Yeah, the playground had to take a backseat to the pool for a number of reasons, but it is underway and the design is, I believe, complete. And we'll be moving that into construction later this year.
Okay. Miles, you had a question?
Yeah, just a couple of quick questions. Thanks for meeting with us. It's unfortunately, but since the pool project began, it's been difficult to get information on it. There's not really been a lot of meetings or outreach about how it's progressing. But I do have a couple of questions. One was the parking. The new pool is supposed to be allowing league play, and I think it was going to be designed within the fenced area that it could have, I don't know if it was 800 or 1,100 people. And this gets back to the parking and the access. How are you going to deal with that if you have leagues and different groups coming on buses? How does that work? Have you increased the parking? Are you going to relay out the parking? I know there was some talk about it. And then also there's a regional bike trail that's supposed to go through the park. So if you can explain some of that and how this project will be dealing with that.
I can kick off with just, this pool will not actually have any leagues or swim teams or busing of participants in to utilize the pool. It's definitely a community pool. There's going to be lots of hours of lap swim dedicated, as well as open swim, plus some swim lessons, aqua fitness, those types of activities that have been traditional at Congress Park. So that'll kick that part off.
It was being designed for league swimming.
Well,
the design was the L was before the league swimming specifically. They increased the width of the pool so they could get the laps in.
Let me clarify that. So 50 meters, we heard a lot from the public. So the old pool was traditionally 50 meters. And so everybody that is a lap swimmer in that neighborhood really wanted us to maintain that structure and provide at least 50 meters. So 50 meters is typically used for league swimming. The 25-yard kick out actually allows for us to be able to facilitate swim lessons while lap swimming occurs, or even aqua fitness programs, so we can have that dual use opportunity. Yeah.
Okay, I'm just surprised to hear that, because with the designers and the size of the pool, it was designed to have a capacity for the league. That's why those numbers came up of 800 people, and the changing rooms, all the sizes were based on that. So that's interesting to hear, because that's quite a large change. So you're not.
Miles, would you like us to answer the parking questions?
Yes, please.
And thanks for those questions. That's good. Gordon or Todd, do you want to talk about the parking lot?
Yeah, we are going to be repaving the parking lot outside of the pool. I'm not sure that we're gaining spaces, Todd. You might comment on that.
Yeah, we're gaining about 6 or 8 spaces, mostly accessible parking, as well as the ability for in the future to facilitate EV charging stations. So the parking lot is going to get repaved, resurfaced, and includes a new drainage system for stormwater, and then which is going to be installed as a kind of a biophilic green water garden, but we will be increasing the spaces by a handful, and those will mostly be accessible, which we weren't able to accomplish prior. So.
Okay, and so just quickly, last question is in the layout of the building. I know it's gone through many changes, and I think just thinking back about the new design, and at one point you had changing rooms as co-ed, which we were kind of questioning, but The main question I have is, in the current design of the building, you actually have the lifeguards in the center of the building. You have a men's side and a women's side. So they can hear if there's any issues or anything was happening, they have ears on. The new design moves the ticket area to the west, which is now separated from the main building, which has private rooms and showers. And I think now it's got a men's changing and a women's changing. I guess my question is, for security, in the old design, you had, you know, maintenance in the center, operations is running from the center. In the new design, if somebody was to get hurt, how are you going to monitor that? How are you going to police it?
Thank you, Miles. That's a very interesting question. So the old building had a lot of time spent in that center guard office. I'm not sure that we could actually hear any kind of emergencies or issues that came up in the change rooms. You are correct. There will be a male and a female locker room, change room area, but there's also going to be a family change room unit that offers additional fixtures or ways for people to go into private change rooms and have that space for families. What we do across the entire system, regardless of where all of our recreation staff are stationed for check-ins and the pool system, we actually do a lot of walkthroughs through our locker rooms as well as change rooms, just to check in and like make sure that everything's spot clean, that we're taking care of any issues that are happening, water on the floor, you know, picking up any paper towels that have fallen, like soap spills, etc. So our staff will frequently go through. What's nice about this design, it has that open feature. So a lot of the layout actually will, I think, increase the amount of hearing that you speak of. We'll be able to hear a little bit more just because the layout is so unique in the sense that our guard office is completely open, and it goes into, we'll have sight on the pool, but then we'll also have sight as to people coming into check into the pool, and then sight for people that are going in and out of those change rooms. So I think from a safety and security standpoint, we took a lot of those things into consideration to make sure sight lines were available.
Thank you. Tom, you had a question?
Thank you, Vicki. With all the construction going on in the area, would we be able to get a park permit for a picnic in August? I'm sorry, did that not come through?
No, I heard it. I'm not in charge of permitting, and do you mean park permit? I don't believe we, Leslie, do you know, do we permit?
In the past, we've gotten a permit, a picnic permit for the pavilion.
Oh, the pavilion.
Pavilion.
It's been night out.
Leslie, do you know, will we be permitting the pavilion this summer?
That's a great question. I don't know because I'm also not in charge of park permitting, but let me, while we take the next question, let me see if I can find any information on our website. But typically our permitting office is really good about posting up when a park or a pavilion or a location is closed for construction and there's no permits allowed. So let me just see if I can find it for you real quick.
I bet because of playground construction that area is not going to be available because it's sited right where the playground is being. But thank you, Leslie. I don't think we have any other questions about that. I have a couple of announcements I wanted to make. Neighbor Andrew Clark is organizing a petition drive to go to the city to oppose the current setup of leaving trash bins on the street. I'm going to post his email and phone number in the chat, and I encourage you to contact him if you would like to support that. And there is also an article in the current Congress Park Neighbors newsletter about this. The second announcement I have is Teller Elementary PTA and their principal contacted me today. There has been a lot of vandalism and abuse at the Teller Elementary playground by people taking their dogs over there, and it tears up the AstroTurf. There's also been graffiti, and cars have been robbed of teachers. So they are going to now lock the playground when school is not open, which is unfortunate, not something they want to do, because neighbors use the playground when school is closed and over the summer. So a heads up to everyone, if you know someone who's chosen to use the playground in a way that it's not designed to be used, please speak with them or report them. Finally, we have a new board member that's joined us, Judith Cohen. She lives on Steel Street and has been a neighbor in Congress Park for over 20 years. So Judith, I want to thank you for joining us tonight, and the board as well. Our next meeting is on June 20th. I'm sorry, June 15th, and we will put a notice out about that. So thank you, everyone who came and presented and offered information and answered our questions. If there's any other questions you'd like to ask right now, raise your hand. This meeting is recorded and it will be available on our website. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Vicki.